and that is the plight of the journalist Julian Assange, who's currently in Belmarsh prison in the UK. With the UK government, it doesn't give a damn about him. All the signs are that the UK government will do whatever the United States government wants to extradite Assange to the United States. I know you care deeply about him, Paul. Let's talk about Julian for a minute. Do you fear the worst for him, do you think? Is he going to be extradited?
If he lives long enough, the real problem for Julian Assange is that the United States really doesn't have any valid case against him. First of all, he's not an American citizen, so he can't commit treason against America. Treason has to be what a citizen does against his own country. So even the false charge of treason is not applicable because he's not an American citizen. He's done nothing illegal under American law or international law. And so the case against him is just totally contrived. And they don't really want it to go to court because there may be a federal judge somewhere that the CIA hasn't yet suborned. Unlike the British magistrate who totally was in the CIA's pocket and did everything the American representatives in the British court told her to do, there might be an honest judge left in a federal court somewhere. And so they don't really want him on trial. They want him dead. And it looks like that's what the British are doing to him in this maximum security prison where he's being held. There are no charges in Britain against him. He's subject to solitary confinement, to all sorts of torture. We've had torture experts in to see him who have reported that he's being tortured, that his life's in danger. His court appearance described by John Pilger, the distinguished documentary filmmaker, shows Assange in total disarray. He can't remember his name. He can't speak. He's completely being destroyed. So I don't think he may not last. I think what the deal is that he dies in the British prison.
They want him dead.
The whole reason of his persecution by the British, they're serving the Americans, of course. The British are the puppet state of Washington and have been since the end of World War II. The whole purpose is to terrify any remaining independent journalists so that they will never again report leaks that are to the discredit of the United States government or an embarrassment to the United States government. There's to be no more journalists anywhere who dare to hold the government accountable. That's what the purpose of Assange's persecution is. It's not to bring him to justice because he's not done anything, and everybody knows that. It's to send a message. Any of you guys that have, because all the honest journalists have been driven out of the print and TV media. There's nobody in the American print and TV media who is not a CIA whore. And according to Udo Ulfkati, it's the same throughout Europe. And we know that's the situation in England. I mean, The Guardian is a joke. It's an adjunct of MI5 or MI6 or the CIA. And so this is a warning to those journalists who have taken refuge in the alternative media, who still do some investigative reporting. You had better stop or you're going to suffer the same fate, because we've now proven that you can be arrested and charged for revealing information that embarrasses the United States government. And you can expect that all the European governments, the British government and the German and French and Italian and so on, all of them will adopt this posture. In fact, the French already have, and the French, they've even now arrested Alain Sorel for simply sharing a link on his website to some video. And he's now drawn a 2-year prison sentence for simply sharing a link on his personal website. So what is going on is to close down the avenue of holding governments accountable, which is journalists who receive leaks, who receive documents showing crimes committed by their governments, and they expose that. That now is a criminal act. It has no law. Maybe they'll make some retroactive law now, but it has precedent of what they've done to Julian Assange.
Yeah.
What they've done to Julian establishes the precedent, and its purpose is to terrify all the honest journalists that are left.
Dr. Paul Craig Roberts is our guest this hour. That's a stark reality, isn't it, for would-be journalists in UK and US universities who might have, idealistic, or they might have an idealistic vision of what they will do when they graduate. And Paul has just laid out there who would take on the establishment when you see what's happened to Julian Assange. And he did appear to be very incoherent and dishevelled and discombobulated. He appeared to be in a bad way. All the witnesses who saw his appearance in court last week testified to his mental health. It is a disgrace. Paul, I don't know how you feel about this, I'm particularly disgusted by the conduct of Jeremy Corbyn, who's supposed to be a leftist, who spent years in the anti-war movement in the UK, pro-Palestinian, anti-war, anti-Israeli imperialism, was Jeremy Corbyn. I don't have to tell you about him, you know who he is. And he's the leader of the Labour Party, Her Majesty's opposition. He's got a very, very powerful voice, at least for the moment, Paul. He hasn't breathed a word about the situation Julian Assange finds himself in. That does shock me, I must say. But you might call me naive.
Well, you can look at it in different ways. For example, he may know by now that the success of the American, British, Swedish propaganda against Assange is so complete that if he says anything in his defense, it makes him look like a kook or a Russian agent. And he's probably already accused of being an anti-Semite and whatever else. And so there's probably a limit to how much he wants to receive brickbats. So we can take that for granted. At least that has happened to him. It may also be he's simply been turned. The power and the money of the CIA is notorious. They can buy anybody they want. They can buy them with threats. They can buy them with money. They own the world. They own all the politicians in Europe. They own all of the media, the press, and they may simply have told him, "Shut up, or else you're next."
Or you're next. You've written
anything he could do about it, and he knows it. He knows it. If they want to get rid of him, they can have him. If they can do any, look what they've done. You know, they murdered what was the guy's name? Kelly.
Dr. David Kelly. Yes, Dr. David Kelly.
They murdered him, and there wasn't, and they broke all of the laws. You know, there wasn't even a coroner's report. And then they staged that fake thing about Putin poisoning the former defected KGB agent. That was all staged. So no one knows to this day what happened to that couple. Have they ever been released? Or has anyone seen them? You know what I'm talking about?
Of course, that's right. The Skripal poisoning, yeah.
Yeah. See, what's become of them? They've just they've disappeared. This was all a hoax. They got away with that. So you know what? A politician is powerless. He doesn't have secret services to combat the secret services operating against him, and so on. And so, I think what you simply see today is the intelligence services. They built up tremendous power during the Cold War. They had the Russian threat, and that justified enormous powers that MI5, MI6, CIA, all of them accumulated. And they really determine it's their agenda. A politician is nothing. He can't get in their way. And if they do, they kill him, like they killed John F. Kennedy. They assassinated Nixon politically with the Watergate hoax, and everybody still believes Watergate. This was a CIA way of getting him out of office because they couldn't kill him right on top of Kennedy. People were suspicious about Kennedy. We saw the attack on Reagan. We still don't know. That doesn't make any sense any more than the Oswald attack on Kennedy. You know, some guy shoots Reagan because he's trying to impress some movie star. Well, I mean, why would that impress a movie star? It's scared to death.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And we've had this admiral, this American admiral, calling for a coup, a military coup against Trump. So these people, they have the power. Jerry Corbyn hasn't got any power.
Paul, you wrote a brilliant article on your website, paulcraigroberts.org, about this. It was only published yesterday. You have to read this, folks. I'll tweet the exact link to the article, but if you go to paulcraigroberts.org, the end of accountable government is close at hand. And Paul charts, and you are a great writer, Paul, because you can do it, you know, using 5 or 6 words where others take, 50 words. You can use 5 or 6 paragraphs where others use 100. It really is good stuff, very succinct. Paul has written about the CIA's determination over the last 7 decades to undermine the free press, not just in the United States, but also around the world. It's a must-read piece. It really is. It's great work, Paul. And you talk about, you go back to Bernstein, writing in Rolling Stone magazine in the 70s. He was warning people that the CIA was bankrolling press services around the world, English and foreign language ones as well. It's great, great work, Paul, It really is. People need to understand, they need to know this stuff. But I think the vast majority of people don't know. They get their news from whichever side tells them what they want to hear. So they might watch CNN because they like the message. They might watch Fox because they like the message. Sky News in the UK because they like the message.
The message is all the same.
It's all the same. That's right. But it's written in such a way that it speaks to people in a way that makes them think that they're on the right side. Isn't that right?
Well, it could be. But the CIA controls the message. There's no independent media anywhere in the West. Look, Udo Ukof's book is now available in English.
Yeah.
It was printed in German. It was a bestseller. There was supposed to be an English edition, and all of a sudden it stopped. And you could buy a copy or two on Amazon for $1,000. A few copies that got out before it was destroyed and stopped. But now there's a new English publisher, and it's available. And the book's for sale on Amazon for $39. I don't know what would be for Amazon England, but that's here. So the book's now available, and he, of course, was with the largest German newspaper. And he says his whole life he was publishing stories CIA handed him to publish. And he said, this is true of all the journalists in Europe. We all do this. And he describes how they're cultivated and how they get obligated and why they cooperate. And it's just, you can't be a journalist if you don't. If you don't serve the CIA's control over explanations, you literally cannot be a journalist anywhere in England or Europe or the United States. And he makes that clear. And people should, he gives a confession. People should read this. Maybe they would finally come out of this stupor and understand that they are losing any prospect of any privacy, any liberty, freedom, any civil liberty. They are quickly descending into the age of tyranny, because tyranny is what you get when you can't hold governments accountable. The entirety of American freedom was based on the media holding the government accountable. We were supposed to have a dispersed and independent media. Under Clinton, it was concentrated into 6 hands. It's no independence. And even before that, the CIA, through Operation Mockingbird, had all kinds of assets, agents, serving in the media. And they could plant any story and control any explanation. And they did, and they are, and they do. And this is available. You can see this. before it's all taken down. I don't know how this publisher managed to get this English edition of Udo Ukati's book out. I would imagine it's going to be somehow sequestered and collected up and burnt as well. It's not the kind of story the CIA wants out.
No, it's called, you're right, it's called Prostitutes in English, recently published, and it has been very difficult to get. You're right to point out that it's on Amazon at the moment. This is Udo Ulfkotte, the German journalist. Paul has described him in his article brilliantly, who blew the whistle on the fact that he was basically told, he was fed what to print and what to write by the Central Intelligence Agency, and basically said it's not just me, it's everybody else. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts is our guest. That article can be read at paulcraigroberts.org. I know you've been on to Paul's website, but if you haven't, do check it out. Like I said, succinct, well-written articles, and it's it's very important that you can share this information with people who don't know this stuff and let them have a look at it. That kind of segues, Paul. It's 26 minutes past the hour here, 26 minutes past 6 here in Manchester in the UK. We're on the line with the great Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. That segues nicely into the media response to stories. Look, the big story over the last couple of days is the US government's claim that, I can never pronounce the full name, it's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the alleged leader of Islamic State, that he was killed by a US-led operation on Saturday night in Syria. And a number of details were given about the raid and about the behaviour of al-Baghdadi and children being killed and stuff like this. Now, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. How, in the name of God, could I possibly know? But I am mindful of the fact, yet again, Paul, today and yesterday when the President was given his statement about it, his briefing, nobody's asking any challenging questions about it. There isn't any scepticism being expressed by the press. Nobody's asking, could we have maybe pinched this guy, al-Baghdadi, and brought him back to the US for questioning? It's just this story that's very similar to the story about Osama bin Laden being killed, and again, only a year out from a general election. I just wonder, are you sceptical yourself about the story about the assassination of al-Baghdadi, Paul, or what do you think?
I don't believe anything in the media.
Yeah.
Nothing they say. And furthermore, I don't think this story is worth any attention. What we should be focused on is Julian Assange. Now, somebody in England has drafted an appeal to the House of Lords, the House of Commons, the Queen of England, to issue a pardon of Julian Assange or get him out of this tortured death that he's in. And they didn't know what to do with it or whatever. I published it yesterday on my website, and I said, look, there are millions of people that read this website. If you'll all sign this petition, millions, we can, if we can't get him out, we can at least embarrass the criminal British government for what they're doing to him. You should be sending people to this website to sign that petition. And every alt news website should put this petition up. I mean, we could get tens of millions of signatures from all over the world.
I've just tweeted it. I've put it out now. Your article with the petition there, I've put it out there, paulcraigroberts.org.
Because, look, if we can't save Julian Assange, we can't do anything. We can't save ourselves. We're helpless. If we can't stop this criminal murder of the last real journalist, we're impotent. We don't even have any right to be free anymore. So everything should be focused on stopping what they're doing to Julian Assange. Because he's us. If he goes, we're going with him. There's no if or but about that. It's the end of free speech, of a free press, of any ability to hold governments accountable. If people don't understand that and they can't get mobilized by that, and they can't do something about it, there's an opportunity. Everybody's website should have this petition. We could stop it. Or if we can't stop it, we could embarrass the British government so bad it would make it clear that the so-called democracy could care less about what people think.
I hear you loud and clear, and I endorse that. I've put a link out to the petition, and if I can get it on my own website, which I have no doubt I will be able to do, even though I don't manage it, I'll do that as well. I agree with you. It is more important than the al-Baghdadi thing, but the Syria thing is obviously something we've spoken about before. Let's stay with Assange then, because I think you're right. I think you're wrong when you say he's the last journalist. You're a journalist. Your writing is excellent and succinct. And right? No, you are.
Look, just a minute. We are not journalists in the way that Assange is. People inside the governments who have security clearances, who see wrongdoing, they leak to him. They give him this information.
Yeah.
They don't do that to me or to you. He has the credibility. He had the ability to get it worldwide. We don't. Not like WikiLeaks could. So he is an investigative journalist with the resources that we don't have. And nobody's going to leak to me or to you because they don't. I mean, why would they? We're not known for investigative journalism or this sort of thing. We give analysis. We try to tell people what's going on or give them an alternative view to the official view. But I don't have any moles in the CIA or the FBI or the State Department, and we're leaking to me the vast multitude of crimes committed by my government. And you don't have leaks from about the vast multitude of crimes committed by the British government. I mean, we're talking about both of these are criminal organizations.
Yeah, gangsters, yeah.
And so in this sense, Assange is. He's the last one. We had in America. We had a couple. We had Chris Hedges and Bob Perry. And Perry suddenly died. He had a website, Consortium News, and both of these guys were known as the principal investigative reporters at one time for the New York Times. Now, of course, the New York Times no longer has investigative reporters. No American newspaper does. They're simply not tolerated. And so they went, to the net, to the internet. Well, Bob Perry's dead. Chris Hedges is still there, but he's got an RT station, so he's now disqualified as a Russian agent. So you see, there's not any journalist. I mean, we're journalists in the sense of analysis or look. Here's a different take on what they're telling you, but we're not Julian Assange. We're not getting all troves of secrets leaked to us, showing the United States' government as a criminal organization, commits massive war crimes, lies and deceives its allies, spies on the personal cell phones of the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of England, and so forth and so on.
Let me argue with you. I love arguing with you. It doesn't get me very far, but I'm going to argue with you anyway. And I have great admiration for Assange and for your characterization of him. But I've been a journalist for years. I've worked in the mainstream, and you talked about in your excellent article, you talked about good journalists leaving the mainstream and going into independent media or going online. Let me just make an argument. Thank God for Julian Assange and for the leaks, the information leaked by WikiLeaks. I would never try to diminish that. But at the same time, I left commercial and national media because I was being prevented from asking the questions that we've been talking about. These are questions I wasn't allowed to ask. These are things we wanted to do. I was asking questions on local, commercial, and then national radio that weren't comfortable. And you were doing the same thing. Our problem is, right, we might not be Julian Assange. People might not give us loads of secret documents. But you're one of the most articulate, sharp-minded, sharp-brained, brilliant writers I've ever met. If you got to go to press briefings, Paul, you'd cause carnage. But you're precluded. You're prevented from doing that. That's the problem. Exactly. That's right. The bloody problem, right? I'm not saying that I'm Assange. I'm not. But I was a very good journalist in another way. But I couldn't do it. all of a sudden you can't. Sorry, you're not welcome anymore. You can't ask that question.
You're not arguing with me. You're just proving my point.
Yeah.
They won't tolerate us, so we're not journalists. We're not allowed at press briefings. We're not allowed to express our opinion on the BBC or CNN or National Public Radio. I mean, I can't even write for my own former newspaper. I was editor of the Wall Street Journal. I couldn't even get a letter to the editor printed. I used to be on American television continuously, all the time. I was on the BBC. But the minute you get off of the CIA's agenda, you're finished.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, we are good journalists in the sense that we can explain to people what's going on pretty accurately, but we are not tolerated as journalists. So we have to operate you on radio. I don't quite know how they haven't shut you down, and me on a personal internet site. I wouldn't even try to get into social media.
Well,
if I tried to get on Facebook or Twitter,
you'd have been gone.
Yeah, it'd just be endless shutdowns.
Well, because of your profile, you'd have an enormous amount of followers on Facebook, so they'd have to shut it down. What's happening in the UK now will be of interest to you. Loan operators like me, for the moment, we're allowed to do what it is we do. Now, I present to all intents and purposes, a professional commercial radio show out of a home-built studio, and it is taken live by some different platforms and some different radio stations. At the moment, the UK government cannot do anything about that, but it plans to, because it's announced that it wants to regulate this online market, because apparently we've got an unfair advantage. Because if the commercial radio stations need to have a license, well, why can Richie Allen make his career doing his own radio show on his own? Why is he exempt from our regulation? And the reason we get away with it up until this point is because we are lone operators, because I'm not part of a schedule of programming on a commercial radio station. But they're coming after us. Next year, the plans are to revisit licensing in the country and to come after the online operators and say, okay, you guys need to have a license. The problem with that is that the license doesn't cost very much money, Paul. But once you accept that you have to have a license, otherwise they'll shut you down. When you are licensed, they can then phone you up every few weeks and say, we've had a complaint. We've had a complaint. You were in breach of a certain guideline. You
don't have to tell me this.
I know, you know this. I'm boring you. This is the way it's going to go. Yeah, exactly. This is where we're going to go. So all we can do is...
It's worse than that, Richie, because with Julian Assange, see, what they're really getting him for is embarrassing the government. Now, even though we don't have any leaks, our explanations embarrass the government. Yeah. So we're right there in the same target. Once they get Assange, they can get us. See, they're not really after him because he's published something that has always been legal in the United States. For example, the New York Times published the Pentagon Papers. Yeah. Not only that, both the New York Times and the Guardian published the information that Julian Assange released. The stuff that they claim Assange did was also done by the Times and the Guardian, because when he got all that information, he shared it with those newspapers, and they published a lot of it. But they're not going after them. They're going after Assange, and they're making the point, he embarrassed us. He's finished. Anybody who embarrasses us is finished, and that will apply to you and me.
That's an excellent point you just made there. I hadn't considered it, but those newspapers did the same thing that Assange did. He was given information by insiders. He published it. They published that information. They did the same thing as him, but because they're protected presumably by their newspapers or
no, they're not protected. The MI5 or MI6 they went to the Guardian. made them hand over all the documents that
they did, of course.
had given them, smashed their hard drives and their computers, and told them, now, from now on, you report to us. You're no longer a newspaper. And that's exactly what The Guardian does.
That's right.
And the New York Times, we know for a total fact, is a CIA asset, just like the Washington Post. They've always been, but now they're totally CIA assets. They're not newspapers. They've ceased to be newspapers. They are propaganda organs that allow the ruling elite to control the explanations. Thus, you see, they went overboard with all the Russiagate hoax, and now the Ukraine hoax, and it's always that way. So the main newspapers have always been agents of the intelligence agencies. They've always been. This includes the British newspapers. So it's not that they're protected. They just now understand that they have to serve that master. They don't serve independent news reporting. They don't serve the facts or the truth. They serve the explanations that the elite want the American people and the European people and the British people fed. And if they don't do that, then they're going to get the same treatment as Julian Assange.
So here's the inevitable question then. And this is speculation now, and I'm sure, you can, if you don't want to go there, but I'll ask you anyway. The big online giants like Facebook and Twitter, they must be equally controlled by the intelligence agencies.
Yes, I'm convinced they were funded with the CIA money.
Get us all over there. And let us think that we're over there.
And I would say the same thing about Google and Amazon. Yeah. I believe it's also true of Amazon. Amazon now has been awarded a $10 billion NSA or CIA contract to develop all the information capabilities for the American security industry. Where did these people come from? Where did this Amazon guy come from? Where did the Google guy come from? It's kind of like this Epstein, the pedophile guy who was blackmailing all the Western leaders and apparently members of the British royal family. Where did he come from? All of a sudden, these people appear and they're billionaires. Nobody knows anything. Where did they come from? Where did they get the money from?
Out of the blue, yeah.
It's just out of the blue. And they got monopolies. They got monopolies, and they're critical monopolies. Amazon, Google, Facebook, Twitter. And what does Facebook and Twitter do? They take down everything that's against the establishment's point of view. I just read the other day that Facebook had now eliminated another 100,000. No, that YouTube is, of course, they're owned by Google now, right?
Yeah.
YouTube just took down 100,000 videos. So, yeah, this is all. These are all creatures of the intelligence services. I'm certain of that. I can't prove it, but why wouldn't it be? Or why would the intelligence services, when they can control the print and TV news, why wouldn't they also control these things?
Yeah, I don't believe the Zuckerberg story. It's a very convenient story.
Yeah.
The background, I don't buy any of it. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts is our guest. Patricia is listening to this with great interest in Zurich, and she says, you didn't have any luck, Richie, but I'm going to try Paul. You can't say no to the ladies, Paul. Patricia says, really interesting to hear Paul's opinion on Julian Assange. I would like to get his opinion on the alleged murder of the ISIS guy Baghdadi. Now, Paul did, to be fair, Paul already said he wouldn't believe a word that's printed by the mainstream media. But she asked specifically, do you think that Trump organised it? Why didn't the Democrats know about it? Is it one of those that is a bit of electioneering, maybe a bit suspicious? Do you want to answer that, Paul? I say hesitantly. Go on. What do you think?
I have no idea, and I don't even know why it matters. I mean, why does it matter? Look, when Obama claimed that they had killed bin Laden, that was 10 years after bin Laden was already dead.
Yeah.
I published on my website all the obituaries in December of 2001.
That's right.
They were all over the Middle East, Egypt. Even Fox News had bin Laden's obituary. He died of renal failure.
Yeah, that's right.
And if 10 years later they claim he's still alive, you know where? He's got no dialysis machine. Nobody lives 10 years who's got renal failure.
No.
And they claim that they killed him 10 years later. So, I mean, if they can get away with that, they can get away with any kind of lie. So I doubt Trump had anything to do with this claim. I don't know who made the claim or why. Maybe it was the military trying to make them look good that they've done something. Maybe some Republican operative said, hey, we can pull the same stunt Obama pulled with bin Laden. We can claim that Trump's got this guy dead, and maybe this will somehow make Americans think he's good and he's done something. Who knows? It can come from any sort of place. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely.
The Special Operations Force wants to say, well, look, we earned our keep. We got this guy. You just don't know. There's so many people have agendas and purposes to be served by making claims. It could be true. It could have been an accident. Well, they may have thought they were bombing a hospital and got this guy.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's ridiculous.
No way to know. Yeah.
No, there's no way to know. Just before we finish up today, thanks for coming back on, by the way, Paul. We love having you on. Paul's website is paulcraigroberts.org. I know you know this, but you can subscribe there and do support the independent media. I'm asking you to do that. You know, when you've got writers like Paul and websites as professionally produced as his, and the fact that he promotes other writers and other investigative journalists as well, do support it by writing a check when you can, or sending a few bucks when you can. paulcraigroberts.org. I don't think I've asked you this before. Final question, and you can dismiss this if you want. What motivates you, Paul? Because you still have this sense of outrage, which I love. And I'm not patronising you now. I'm not saying because you're older than I am. I'm not patronising you at all. But what keeps the fires burning? What motivates you to write these articles and to do what you do every day?
Truth. If people don't know the truth, they can't be free. And, you know, freedom in the Western sense is really a new thing. The notion that the government is accountable to law, accountable to the people, this is a new idea in terms of history. Basically originated in England, and it got distributed to the colonies. And it's being lost, it's being destroyed. And so what then is a person? He's just some kind of adjunct to whatever the ruler. He's nothing. He's got no protection of law. See, they're turning law into, law is supposed to be a shield of the people. Instead, it's being turned into a weapon in the hands of the government. That's what we see with Assange. He has no protection of law. They've taken all the protection of law away from this guy, and they're using law as a weapon against him. That's the old way of doing things prior to the British Glorious Revolution, prior to the American Constitution. So freedom and the fact that a person is a person in his own right and not some sort of lowly subject of some ruling class. This is unique in history. It came out of England, it went into the colonies, and now it's being destroyed. Well, how can we let something this great of achievement, this precious, be destroyed? But we are. The people are insouciant, they're indifferent, they're indoctrinated, they're brainwashed. I still get letters from idiot feminists who say, well, Assange should be punished. He raped those girls. Well, of course, he didn't rape anybody. But suppose he did. Why would you give up civil liberty of all of us just to punish Assange?
Yeah.
It shows how stupid these people are. You see what I'm saying? They're mindless. And they're losing their very essence. Their soul is draining out as Assange goes. And that's what motivates me. You can't get this back. If you lost it, how are you going to get it back? Particularly in an era of identity politics where the ruling class has everybody at each other's throats. There's no unity. There's no ability to stand against the government. The blacks are too busy hating the whites, and so on, and the women hating the men, and the transgenders, and the whatever. It's so much disunity.
Division, yeah.
There's no ability to stand up to a government. The various groups are busy hating each other, fighting each other. Well, this frees the government. So yeah, it's easy to see. I mean, this is what motivates. I mean, I've got children, grandchildren. They're going to grow up slaves. Their mind will be controlled by the explanations. It's just like I said in my column that you referred people to, that I wrote the other day. We are at the same place that people in George Orwell's 1984 are. Big Brother has complete control over everything they think. And that's where we are. And that's what they use the press for, and the TV. And it's what and we already have a lot of internet sites that are run by the elite. All the big ones full of money. You know what they are.
Yeah, of course.
There are a lot of big internet sites. Where did all that money come from? How are they getting this money when I don't have that kind of luck getting money? And all this stuff is to control the explanation, to combat us. And these sites have cachet that we don't have. Let's go to Salon, let's go to HuffPost. All of these types of sites. This is all security service or some elite elements funding this. How do you have so many paid people, so many different writers, all this? It's just, it's not believable. So they're already operating in the internet. They may not have to do anything to us except just smother us out. They'll have so many of their own internet sites. And then Google simply doesn't list us, so nobody can find us.
Yeah, but you get up every day and you say, not on my watch, which I think is an amazing thing. Well, because I do. But you,
as long as I have a watch, yeah. But there'll come a day I'll get up and my site won't be there, and I search for it, and Google can't produce where it is. So they can do that whenever they want.
Well, we do know. We do
Google,
know. Yeah. Sorry, Paul.
Google,
go ahead.
Google already makes it hard to find sites they disapprove of. There are a lot of sites you have a hard time finding them now. So maybe some other systems will catch on other than Google. Who knows? I would have thought that the Russians and the Chinese would have done something like that just to get freedom of the press out. But apparently not. I guess the Chinese are more afraid of freedom of the press than the CIA is. But you would think that would be the way for them to prevail, to defeat us, is just by having freedom of the press, because there are more facts on their side than on our side.
That is a whole discussion, sincerely, for another day. That's that really is, actually. We could spend another half an hour talking about what's happening with.
Well, let's do it one day.
No, seriously, of course we will. Paul's website is paulcraigroberts.org. I don't need to tell you that. Many of our listeners, they've known about Paul for a long time. Former editor of the Wall Street Journal, brilliant author, and of course the former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy, a distinguished guest on the Richie Allen Show today. Thanks, Paul, for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I know that we'll catch up again this